5,
S
F,
M
M,
New Haven
New Haven,
Streaming
Slimming,
Live
Live,
at
at
www.
www.
Dot New Haven Independent.
No, yay. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. New Haven has a new museum, folks, the first of its kind in North America. This museum is dedicated to Palestinian history, culture, and art. Today we're fortunate to have in the studio the founder and executive director of the Palestine Museum, Faisal Saleh, who is going to tell us all about it. Thank you for joining us, sir. I've met you before. It's a real pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And a lot's been going on in a short time down at 1764 Litchfield Turnpike. Litchfield Turnpike's a fancy way of saying Route 69 right after it hits Westville and Amity, and right past the Wilbur Cross. And that's a new museum that's getting international attention. I read about it in an Israeli newspaper called Haaretz. I'd heard about it before, but that's where I learned the depth. And so how's recently, it's pretty recent, right, Mr. Saleh, that you opened this museum?
Yeah, we opened the museum on April 22nd. So we've been open almost 4 months now.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to ask you a little bit to tell us how this came to be that you decided to open North America's first Palestine Museum, and also why there isn't another one. I mean, Mexico's in North America, Canada, United States is a big country. There are Palestinian people from that part of the world living in our part of the world. Why have we had a museum like this yet, and why did you decide that you wanted to start one?
Well, there are a number of questions here, so let me take them from the beginning. First of all, I've been living in the United States for about 49 years now. And for most of that time, I've been busy just working, keeping my nose to the grindstone, like they say. And I really didn't participate in any activities related to Palestine, which is, my homeland. And about several years ago, I sold the business that I was operating for 25 years.
What business was that?
It was a benefits administration business, a company called Alaquant. It was a national business throughout the country, and that gave me some options, an opportunity to think what I was going to do and all that. And I kind of started thinking about that at the time, but it wasn't until recently, about a little over a year ago, that I started thinking seriously about this idea. The idea of the museum came to me because I felt for many, many, many years, the mainstream media in the U.S. in particular, and in the West in general, have kind of painted Palestinians in a negative light. In some cases, they dehumanized Palestinians and made Palestinians look like they're all terrorists and things like that. And I know that's not true. So the idea was I wanted to create an institution that can provide the American public with real information about the Palestinians, who the Palestinians are, and what they're like. And I thought the best way to do that would be through art and culture. And that's how I started thinking about the idea of opening a museum.
Boy, you did a quick turnaround there. It was only a year ago, a little more, that you said, okay, now I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And by April, you had it open. And I mean, it's not some little room. I was there the other days. This is a museum. This is on the first floor of a corporate office building on Litchfield Turnpike. And when I was going through it, I was impressed by how much material there was in a bunch of rooms. My guess was that some of it's going to be permanent collection and some of it's going to be revolving.
Yeah. first of all, I started working on the idea in June of 2017, and that's when I first secured the domain name PalestineMuseum.us.
Which is really something that there was no domain name with that.
No,
That's interesting.
Every business I started, I usually start with a domain name. Once you have the domain name,
You got the business.
You got the business.
And do you do all the different suffixes? Do you do
Yes.
.org, .net, .at,
I
.com?
I grabbed all the ones I could grab.
No, I've
but,
noticed that too in starting my own operation here. How cheap it is.
Yeah,
They
$10.
only let you go about 10 years, right? Like
Yeah,
I think every few years I renew it so nobody else gets it, because that's a valuable $10 purchase.
It
because
is.
Somebody takes it away, they kind of own your
On
brand.
your business. Yeah, but the beautiful thing about it is there was a new extension, which is the US, but .us was introduced a few years ago only, and that was great because it gave us the opportunity to distinguish ourselves from. There's a Palestinian museum in Palestine, in the West Bank, and we don't want to see any confusion between them and us, and so we call ourselves Palestine Museum.us, and we worked with a Palestinian graphic designer to come up with a logo, and he was clever enough to drop the word US and use and repurpose the word US that's in museum. So it would say Palestine Museum, but if you look carefully, the word US is in a different color, and that allow us to have a nice brief logo. And for a graphic, he used the Palestinian embroidery pattern, a popular pattern, to signify the museum, so that it is, it's an art organization.
Why was there not another Palestine museum? I mean, this issue about what's happening to Palestinians is in the world media all the time. As I said earlier, there are communities of people hail from that part of the world. Why haven't we had one until now?
Well, there a number of important factors had to get together for something like this to happen. And first of all, you have to have the vision, the ideas, and you have to have the ability to secure a supply of art, and you have to have the venue, and you have to put all that together. And most importantly, you need the funding. And I'm sure a lot of people thought of the idea, but they could not get the funding to do it.
How did you get the funding?
Well, I supplied the funding myself, so that was what made things happen. And also, we owned the building to start with.
Oh, you own the building?
Yes.
Okay, so
my wife and I own the building.
Oh, they do have to make a mortgage, I bet.
And so, as you can tell, I mean, the office space in Woodbridge is not really going that quickly, and it was kind of slow, and we had a lot of empty space in the building.
Oh,
that was in a bad shape and cut up. And
so you got a lot of stuff in there that's very, very high quality. I mean, there were some. I think one of my favorite parts of the museum were historical photos you got from government archives from the U.S. government about photographs of the Middle East, of a specifically what are now Palestinian areas, of people going through everyday life. And I think the point you're making there pretty clearly was, we were there, we've been there, we exist.
Yep.
Was that stuff, I'm guessing you have access free, but then it has to be access to it free, but then it costs money to make it museum quality to hang on the wall. How did you go about getting these pictures from government archives? How did you get that idea? And then how did you turn them into, I'm guessing, will be a permanent museum exhibit?
Yeah. Well, the photographs are from a collection that has 22,000 photographs, and it is donated to the Library of Congress by the Matson family from Illinois. And the Matson family had migrated to Jerusalem in the late 1800s and eventually started a hotel called the American Colony Hotel, which is still in operation in Jerusalem.
So insane colony.
Colony, yes. And the late Matson was an avid photographer. He would go every weekend and shoot photographs everywhere in Palestine. And when he passed away, his family donated the entire archive, which had 22,000 plates. These were like glass plates and early kind of photographic material. And the Library of Congress digitized them, and they're all available online. Anybody can get online and peruse through all those.
So did you
and
print
download
these
them.
out from online?
Yeah. So, but the
But
trick
it came
is,
out high quality.
yeah, you had to kind of scan through them and figure out which ones are usable, which ones are worth having. So there was a lot of photo editing, if you will.
Of course. What am I picking? Am I guessing maybe 30 photos you picked out? That 22,000?
A little more, maybe like 80 or so.
But they're not all up on the wall, are they?
Well, they are. There was another wall in the hallway. We had a bunch of them too.
Okay.
And anyway, we've obviously picked photos that had higher resolution, and we also worked with a talented shop in Westville. That
Lotta Studio?
the Lotta Studio, thank you, who were able to enhance them further and printed them brilliantly.
They did. Now, was this
and-
donated, or did you have to pay them for this?
No, we had to pay them for that.
And would you mind telling our listeners some examples of the photos you pulled from the archive, what they actually show?
Yeah. Well, so a lot of them show different scenes in Jerusalem, for instance. From the early 1900s, you see pictures of the Dome of the Rock, you see Al-Aqsa Mosque, you see the Mount of Olives, the Church of the Gethsemane, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and scenes, like the stages of the cross, the Via della Rosa.
And they all have people in them.
They have people.
That's crucial, right?
There are scenes of school graduations, there's artisans making things, just a variety. There are some political scenes also, people demonstrating, British soldiers quelling the demonstrations very violently and attacking the demonstrators who are unarmed, etc. So there's a wide range of photographs, and I should also point out that a good part of the look of that was also I would give credit to Gabriel da Silva from the Da Silva Gallery and Frame Shop in Westville, who is really responsible for the layout and the installation of those photographs, the mounting and installation.
I do
on
think
the
the
walls.
photographs themselves are worth the visit. What I loved, in addition to that, were the bright colors of the modern artwork. So you have modern Palestinian artists, as well as Margaret Olin, who's a Jewish professor at Yale, who's done a lot of artwork and has an exhibit up there from her photographs. But the artwork really struck me, the bright colors of them and the stories they told. And one of them I really found interesting was one about who gets to paint murals. Because, I mean, the point of the museum partly is who gets to tell the story, who gets to speak, who exists. And you had one exhibit of there about a 19-year-old had been shot on a roof watching Israeli troops. And it wasn't clear whether maybe he had thrown stones or maybe he was just watching. And there was a street graffiti artist, and graffiti is powerful. That is art, street art in the West Bank. And it is the West Bank, right?
Yes, it's in a refugee camp called Dheisha refugee camp outside of Bethlehem.
In addition to showing the street art, which I'm a real fan of street art and when it's good and looking why it's there and who does it, you tell a story there about how he had to negotiate, this muralist named Ahmed, how to negotiate with sort of the people who enforce the rules in the West Bank on the Palestinian side. And he wanted it to be a peace message, and he wanted to picture doves. So he put doves in there. And they insisted for him to have permission that there had to be a gun in there, too, to show that there was also armed resistance. And they, so one of the doves actually has a gun. That's a nuanced, story there.
Very interesting, yes.
And I think it shows how art is complicated and culture is politics.
Well, art is the mirror of society. I mean, it's the mirror of life there. And I could tell you, there are so many Palestinian artists that people had no idea that there were that many. There are more than 1,000 artists at least. And some of them are working under very, very challenging situations. We have 7 or 8 artists represented at the museum from Gaza. And they're working under very extreme conditions, lack of electricity, food. Gaza has been under siege for over 10 years. And the work they produce is incredible given the conditions that they're in.
You also have an audio exhibit. You can use your QR code on your phone. It's taken from the Bay Area, where you talk to Palestinian Americans about their relationship to the homeland and how they're living now and how they view the situation. And I think that's much more overtly political. Their talks are about how
a
they
bit.
feel about the situation.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also interesting to me because it's a third way, in addition to photographs, in addition to murals, it's a third way that we get to actually hear and see, because they're pictures too, Palestinians as human beings telling their side of the story.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean the museum. One of our goals, really, in the museum is to represent as many Palestinian artists as possible, both in Palestine and in the diaspora outside of Palestine. And we've kind of succeeded. We are representing some like 40 or 50 artists in the museum, and we're beginning to rotate some of the artwork. And we have a very rich pipeline of art on its way. And since the museum became very well known now, most of the Palestinian artists would like to have their work exhibited there, and they see that as an important
So you
thing.
started something.
Yeah.
You're given a voice. And the voice belongs to Faisal Saleh,
Saleh, yeah.
who is the founder of the Palestine Museum at 1764 Litchfield Turnpike. It's been open since April. It's already being known worldwide. When I visited, I met someone from New Jersey who was coming up to see it on a Sunday. And so obviously you're not just drawing from a local base of people. I think the story of this museum is intertwined with your personal story. And I was reading the highlights of it in a story in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper. You told me that at least one of the facts was wrong in terms of what age you were when you got here. So as I read it, your family, before you were born, left in 1948 during the war that you called the Nakba, and the Jews called the War of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
And your family left Salama and went to the West Bank.
Salama.
Sorry. And you went to a town near Ramallah.
Mm-hmm.
You were born in 1951, the 11th child in your family.
Mm-hmm.
And you were all living in a single small room for the whole family. Your father had been a successful farmer. Mm-hmm. Now he was rebuilding a career. He did Red Cross work, then office work with the Jordanian government. Eventually got a bigger home. And then at 17, you came to the United States. So far, is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So what brought you to the United States at 17?
Well, I came to for education to finish the last year of my high school, but my parents also were anxious to get me out of there. They were afraid I would get mixed up with some of the violence that's going on there.
And how did you feel about leaving?
It was kind of a mixed feeling. It was the first time I left home. I'd never left home before that. Not even for one night all my life, and so I was kind of anxious about that. But I wanted, as a youngster, I wanted really to discover the world and see new things, and I was very curious about what's it like in the U.S. And
what was it like coming here? How'd you feel as a Palestinian living in the United States at 17 years old?
Well, it was challenging and difficult at times. Keep in mind that when I came here, it was 1969. The year of Woodstock, and demonstrations in the streets outside of this building. And things were crazy in the U.S. at that time. So it was not an easy time to come in and get integrated with the society. And the language was kind of an issue, because when you study a foreign language, you get the feeling you know the language until you go to the country where they speak that language.
So you had studied English? I
studied English for, maybe 6-7 years. But of course, I had to learn a lot of it here in the U.S. And
but you obviously did well. You went to college here.
Yeah, I went to, first of all, 1 year I had a full scholarship at a Quaker school in Newtown, Pennsylvania, called the George School. And then after that, I got similar financial aid from Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio.
So you went to Oberlin?
Yeah.
Boy, what a place to be in the early 70s, late 60s. That was a radical hotbed.
Yeah. The president of the college was demonstrating in Washington that year himself. And I got a graduate degree also from UConn, but I had that on the side while I was working.
So you decided not to go into activism. You went into business.
Yes.
What was your degree in?
My degree was in economics, but in those days it didn't really matter what your degree was in. You didn't learn a whole lot in college.
Basket weaving at Oberlin, yeah.
I mean, you learned from the environment, but in an indirect way.
But what brought you out to New Haven?
I have a brother who lived in New Haven, so that was kind of my base. And I did. I started working in Connecticut, and then I had done some work in Michigan for a few years, and eventually came back to Connecticut to start a business. I started my first business in 1979.
What kind of business?
That was a publishing company. I published a magazine for about 13
Oh, yeah, what
years.
kind of magazine?
It was on employee benefits. It was called Benefits News Analysis.
Employee benefits. What
Yes.
had gotten you into that?
That
From
was my
Oberlin in the 70s.
Yeah, that was my field actually. When I graduated, my first job was an underwriter at the Travelers Insurance Company in Hartford.
Wow.
And then I progressed into different positions. I worked for 5 years as an employee, and then after that, I hung that up. And
You were entrepreneurial.
yeah, and I just couldn't work for.
Interesting decision about going into insurance and then employee benefits. What
Mhm.
what led you to that at a time when people you had gone to college were going into political pursuits? You were not political, it sounds like, at all.
Not at the time, and I thought, you really need a job, and jobs were not easy to get in
There
1974
was a
when I
and there was a
graduated.
recession. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was tough, and you had to know somebody. And at any rate, I indulged into business, and like I said, I minded my own business for many years, and I had the entrepreneurial blood in me. And in 1979, I started that publishing company, and while I was doing that, I also was very interested in computers, and I was dabbling with computers back in the mid '70s when the first personal computers came out. And
That was early 80s, no?
no. I had a Radio Shack personal computer in 1977.
Okay.
Uh, that was before the IBM computers and all that. So, and I was into programming and doing a lot of things. So I started dabbling, doing some projects for companies in the employee benefits area. And by 1985, I had enough going on to establish a software company and hired a couple of people to work with me. And that company took off and did very well, and eventually morphed into an outsourcing company where we did the work for the clients instead of them running the software. And in 2010, that company was sold to a global organization called Willis Towers Watson.
So you were an American success story. You came here, you worked hard, you even had to really learn the language better, and you went on to start these companies in American business and make a lot of money. What was your Palestinian identity in all those years? What did you think you were hearing all these horrible things happening where you came from? And you were living, I would say, the ultimate American life.
Well, it was always in the back of my mind. It's always in.
Well, your
in
family
my
had
thoughts.
moved to Kuwait, right? So there wasn't an immediate reason to visit back.
Well, some of them were in Kuwait and the Gulf, and there were some in the U.S. here also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but not back in the West Bank.
Not back in the West Bank at the time. Yeah, I mean, as a Palestinian, if you survive, you're doing a good job. So we don't have to be activists necessarily. We simply can persist, and that in itself is success.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept that in the back of my mind, and I've had an opportunity to participate in a few things, the Palestinian activities, but none of them were really compelling to the point where I really wanted to get involved with them. So all that until a year or so ago.
What changed it? What happened in your mind in your heart that made you said, you know what, I'm successful? You're still working, you tell me, more than full time, making a living in your mid 60s. What made you say, I'm going to throw down and in no time create this Palestine Museum and take a stand and tell the story?
Well, really, I've been thinking about it for a while, as I mentioned earlier, and I kind of thought that I had a responsibility to Palestine to do something, and I was most positioned among all Palestinians to do this project, given my background in business, in technology, in understanding how things work in the United States, and having that talent. I thought I had that responsibility to do something, and to do something very constructive, and something that I can be proud of and could last for generations, and also something that be a service to the American public as well as to the Palestinians.
Which I think you've done with. We're talking about the Palestine Museum on Litchfield Turnpike. Been open since April and already attracting a lot of attention, putting on display the works and the stories of Palestinian people. And it's created by Faisal Saleh, who is here in our studio, WNHH on Dateline New Haven, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. There are also artifacts in the museum, your late father's ID documents. And again, the theme I keep getting is we exist, we were there, we are there. We're human beings. Our story deserves to be told too.
Yeah.
A fair way to put it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there was this notion that Israel was promoting that the land was, a land without people for a people without land, and that's such a fallacy. I mean, we have exhibits that show, activities of Palestinians, school graduations, women delegations, women movements.
That one I found interesting. That was from like mid-1900s, right?
Yeah, like 1939 or 1929 and things like that. So, and there was a thriving community and a society there with cultural excellence and artistic excellence, and it was a thriving community. And
so you said, you're quoted saying that you saw art as a neutral way to support the cause. You said, I'm not a political person. I would like to push back on that a little from a position of praise. This is not a criticism.
Sure.
I don't think it's possible to talk about most situations in the world when one side is feeling voiceless, to not have art be political. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's an important thing. So when I went to that museum, I saw a big mural of Rachel Corrie, the American who was killed in protest. Mm-hmm. That's political. There were books that I wanted to look at and read that were highly political. They were saying that, like, I'm a Zionist, a proud Zionist, although I don't support the policies of the current government. I am very much a Zionist and feel the Jews should have a homeland, although I do wish there were a two-state solution, and I think that Palestinians have been dehumanized, and the story needs to be told. But it's political. There are books they're saying, they're very political books that say, and they're and as well as novels, but they all say the Jewish side of the story is wrong, and that we have a story that hasn't been told. That's the right story.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can't have a museum in vacuum.
Or talk about the issue when the art is political.
Yeah, and most of the art we're exhibiting in the museum is not really political. And granted, there may be like 2 or 3 pieces that have some political overtones. The Rachel Corrie mural can be viewed a bit politically, but really it is more of a human tragedy that what happened with Rachel Corrie, and she was such a brave.
But the choice to exhibit her, rather than the personal tragedy of an Israeli citizen killed by an attack, which story does get told, so that you don't need a museum for that on the Field Turnpike. But that is a political decision whose story you tell. And again, I mean that as a compliment. I think that your museum is telling a story that wasn't told. That's a political decision.
Yeah. There are plenty of museums that exhibiting what you described.
I agree.
So I mean,
that's right. But I'm just saying it's political, and that's political too.
Yeah.
The fact that and while I am a Zionist, and I think it is a tragedy when Jews are killed as well, I think we would agree that it is a political decision that tells the story of the loss of every Jewish life much more than the loss of every Palestinian life. That tells the Jewish side of the story, which again I have a lot of sympathy for, but doesn't tell the Palestinian side of the story. So that's my only point, is that I think you can't avoid politics in every decision about the Middle East, no matter what side you're on.
I mean, you're right, definitely right about that. Like,
and people shouldn't be scared away from it. I mean, you shouldn't be scared away from the fact that it's uncomfortable and it's painful, and that there's a lot of tragedy and passion that need to be brought to the surface and be part of the discussion.
I mean, the idea behind the museum is there's a lot of places where you can listen to the political side. You can watch it 24/7 on CNN and BBC and all the networks day and night.
Which is one side. And we wanted to change all that. We want the American people to know the Palestinian people, as humans. And we wanted to get away from the mumble jumble of the political strife. And we wanted to focus on, artistic excellence, on literature, on poetry and things like that, where we can know each other as humans.
And
There's no other way to solve a political problem.
exactly, and I think we want that to be the discourse. We want to change the discourse from the politics to the art and literature discourse.
Okay. Well, you did have a political event this weekend, which sounded like it was very successful. Overflow crowd watched on the web. A Palestinian member of the Knesset was visiting, Ada Tuma Sliman,
Yes.
who is saying something that a lot of you might be surprised, you might not, that a lot of Zionists like myself agree with her and are very upset about some of the recent laws that have been passed that call Arabs second-class citizens and restrict the rights. And she was here to speak about that. Again, that is political. I would argue there's a side that
sure.
needs to be told. I'm glad it's told.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that was kind of a unique situation. Actually, the museum was not really the sponsor of that event. It was most of the host of the event. There are a number of local New Haven organizations that had sponsored the event, and they've asked us if we would host it, and we agreed happily to do it because we thought it was a great opportunity for everybody to hear about the issues.
So who's been coming to the museum week to week?
We can probably classify them into two categories. One category are Palestinians or the people of Palestinian origin from the area, from the local area, from New Jersey, from Boston, from New York, etc. And these are people that are kind of feel the need to come and be at the museum because it speaks to their heritage, it speaks to their identity, and for them, it's the first and only place that is theirs. They walk into the museum and they feel, oh my God, finally there is something that talks to us.
I saw that in one of the women I was talking to from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Just how she felt being in that space and looking what was on the wall.
So to them, it's like a pilgrimage to come to the museum. It's a shrine, kind of. And the other audience are local people, American people from the local area, and even we've gotten non-Palestinians from New York and from New Jersey and Massachusetts, people that told us, oh, we saw this in the New York Times and we really wanted to come and see it. We want to see what this looks like. And, a lot of the people that come are impressed, and they feel the museum really is very informative and thought-provoking, and they just think it's a beautiful place. And we get a lot of compliments. Most of the people were at the event on Sunday. We had like 150 people there. I really liked the museum, and they were very impressed by the artistic expressions there and the look of it. And overall, we have not really had any negative responses from anybody to the museum.
Cal, and I'm very sorry if I messed up your name. Writes in our Facebook to check in. Hello, thanks for listening to Dateline New Haven. We have just a few minutes left with the founder and the executive director of the Palestine Museum. Great addition to our community, Faisal Saleh. So how about yous? Are they coming?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, half the audience on Sunday, more than half, were from members of the Jewish community. We've had one of the congregations sent 30 people about 3 weeks ago to one of the...
that was our congregation. Yeah,
yes.
Bethel Kesser, Israel.
Yeah, exactly. And I gave a talk to them, and they toured the museum, and I think everybody who attended thought the museum was a good idea, and it's very helpful for them to understand. They had a couple of things were kind of difficult for them to see and things, but overall, I think it was a very positive experience for everybody.
I guess I would argue that difficult is positive.
It is. I mean, it's
on all sides. And I think, when Palestinians hear our side, the Jewish side, there's some things that are difficult too. I don't see how we solve it without seeing each other, because I think there's dehumanization that takes place on all sides in all political conflicts. And I don't know a way to solve them without seeing each other as human beings and listening to each other and seeing each other, rather than trying to, because we do feel that way as Jews. We feel in our history people have always dehumanized us, and that was a way to try to excuse and carry out genocide.
I mean, it's amazing how much in common the Palestinians have with the with the Jewish experience. I mean, in terms of the persecution and the discrimination and not having anybody to stand up for them. Palestinians feel the same way, and it's unfortunate that that the people who've experienced that are somewhat involved in inflicting the same thing on other people, whether directly or indirectly. But one thing we like to clarify to people is that the Palestinians have no issue with the Jewish faith, with the Jewish people. The conflict is between the political Israel, the political Zionist.
And I guess I
movement.
believe that only they can solve it. I mean, I think we need to know the full story, and we need to be supportive of peace and hearing each other.
There's definitely opportunities for peace that can be gotten at, and I think we would like to see more conversation about that, more conversations about the peace, more mutual respect, more understanding of each other's issues and concerns. Definitely, the opportunities are there, but they need to be acted on. They need to be seized, and people need to have the courage to do that.
Anyway, again, I want to compliment you. What a great job you've done with the Palestine Museum. And back to your comment about, you said the visitors had some tough moments, but it was mostly positive. I guess for me, tough equals positive. For me, as a Jewish person going, who feels very strongly about the right of Israel to exist and the two-sidedness of this, this conflict in the Middle East, it breaks my heart the way it continues. It breaks my heart the way that people have been dehumanized on both sides. And I think it's about time and long overdue that the Palestinian side get to tell its story and be human and come out from the shadows for the general public. We don't have to agree with each other. In fact, it's best when we engage on the areas we don't agree, but I think we do agree that everyone's life matters and we want peace. Fair way to say it?
Exactly. Well,
I got the mic here, and tell me what you have to say.
And thank you for that, for those thoughts. I think they're great, and we would like to see more people have those ideas that you have.
So how can they? And again, I don't agree with everything, right? Like I am a Zionist.
Sure.
But I thought it's a great museum and a long overdue project, and I wish you great success with it. How can people go? What hours do they call ahead, or are there?
The museum is open only on Sundays, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. For people who are unable to negotiate these hours, we have appointments. We can make appointments for people to see it at different times.
And we can give you the details like 1764 Litchfield Turnpike, but just Google Palestine Museum. U.S. Woodbridge. I just did Palestine Museum. I got it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Faisal, Saleh, it was a real pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you for coming in. Best of luck with the Palestine Museum. I urge everybody to go there, especially if you think positive visit to museums is not necessarily a completely comfortable experience. Although I will say that I love modern art and political art, and I thought it was great, and the archival art. But keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity.
Congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on WNHH FM. Thanks to our guest, Faisal Saleh, Executive Director of the Palestine Museum. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. Now we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.
שמחות